Hi guys, we are starting chapter 2, lesson 3. So you can go ahead and take out your study guide and also your notes because we'll be taking some notes today. So our title of this lesson is subtracting integers. And just a reminder, integers is just another way of saying positive and negative whole numbers. So when we refer to integers, it means we now include those negative numbers. Okay, so we can title your notes 2, 3 and call it subtracting integers. So last class we were looking at adding integers and now we're looking at subtracting integers. So I'm gonna write down 4 examples of types of subtraction problems you would see. So I'm gonna split them up to example A, B, C, and D. And I'm going to use this number line up here to help me show visually what's going on. I'm going to lay out the examples here first, and then we'll look at them together using our number line. So we could have a number that's not big enough to subtract another number. So we can have a small number subtracting a bigger number. I could have a negative number subtracting a positive number. I could have a positive number subtracting a negative number. And I could have a negative number subtracting a negative number. And I'm going to put the negative numbers in parentheses there. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens on our number line. Remember, when we have subtracting, if we have a subtraction sign or a negative sign, we're going to start thinking going towards the left. And when we see a positive sign, it means going to the right. So that kind of can tell us which direction to go on our number line. Let's do example A here. So this is saying I'm starting at 2, and then I'm taking away 5, which means because this is a negative or a subtraction sign, means I'm going to the left, right? So I could go over to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I end up at -3. So -3 is my answer. Okay, example B, -3 minus 5, which means I'm starting at -3 and I'm subtracting 5. So I'm going to the left 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's at -8. So my answer is going to be -8. Okay, next one, 4 minus -2. Now this one kind of messes with our brains a little bit because if we think of subtracting a negative, then subtracting means going to the left, and then going even, and then having a negative means, well, now it doesn't mean we're going to continue to go to the left, okay? So it's almost like when you have 2 negatives, it becomes a positive. Well, this is an example where that happens. We can also think of it as debt, like if you owed someone $2, you're -$2 in debt. But if someone takes away your -2, your debt, takes away your debt, takes away your -$2, then you can't go even more negative when your debt's taken away, right? So something kind of crazy happens. It actually becomes a problem where it's 4 plus 2. So you can even think of it as like these 2 negatives coming together and making a positive, but you're starting at 4, and then because it's a double negative, you're actually going to go to the right. You're going to go right 2, and that becomes 6. So anytime you see a positive number subtracting a negative number, think of that as just the 2 numbers being added. Okay, so that's actually a positive 6. And then our last example, -1 minus -4. So again, look at this, a negative, double negative. So anytime you see a double negative, it becomes adding. So we have -1 plus 4, and we've done addition problems before with our negatives, right? So we're starting at -1 and I'm gonna use pink here, -1, and we're adding 4. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is at 3. So the answer to that is 3. Okay, so this all might look kind of confusing and you're like, well, do I have to draw a number line every single time? The answer is no. And the reason why is because there's actually a rule that we have observed from this. I don't know if any of you guys have caught on already, but the rule for subtracting integers is that you can really just add the opposite sign of the number that's being subtracted. So let's write that rule here. And to use mathematical terms, we could say to subtract an integer, add its additive inverse. Inverse means the opposite. So another way we could say that is add the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to teach you a simple way for this to work every single time with any addition or subtraction problems, okay? So when we are looking at a subtraction problem, when there's negatives, I use this method called the two-stroke method. So 2 strokes, do, like that, okay? So this is how it works. Because when I subtract, it's the same thing as adding the opposite sign of the number I'm subtracting. I can do this. Put 1 stroke here, and then another one right here. This it went from 2 minus 5 to 2 plus -5, meaning adding the opposite. And so now I've turned this into an addition problem, and I know how to do additions with integers, with adding negatives, right? I just did that last class. And so I basically don't have to relearn a whole new thing and draw a number line every single time. I'm basically just turning it into an addition problem and working it out again. And so when I think of this, I apply my rules for addition, and my answer is -3, which I solved down here. So you can check it out if you want to. Example B, let's try the same method. Adding the negative, okay? Adding the opposite. So this becomes -3 plus -8. And again, it's an addition problem. Sorry, -3 plus -5. Read the answer out in the problem, didn't I? -3 plus -5. So this becomes my answer. -8 is my answer. For C, again, I can add the opposite. So I'm literally, if it's a positive, I'm making it a negative. If it's a negative, I'm turning it into a positive. So I turned this into adding the opposite sign of that number that comes next, which is positive. So I now have 4 plus +2, which is 4 plus 2, and that's 6. So that worked out for me. Example D, adding the opposite. So I'm turning my subtraction sign into an addition sign. And then because this is a -4, I'm doing the opposite of a -4, which is a +4. So when I added that stroke, it became a +4. Now I have -1 plus +4. And that becomes, my answer is +3. Okay, so let's take a look at your study guide and see if we can practice some of these out and practice our methods here. So if you want to read through, here's the rule to subtract an integer, add its additive inverse, but a more simple way of looking at it would be to add the opposite sign, okay? So thankfully our 2-stroke method can do that for us. And so I might just even get into the habit of doing that here. Adding the opposite, adding the negative. So that becomes 9 plus -16, okay? Number 2, 7 minus 19. Well, I'm adding the negative. So it's 7 plus -19. Number 3, 12 minus 21. I'm adding the negative, adding the opposite. So it's 12 plus 21. So we can work these out. Let's do these three together. So let's practice our addition. And so when we subtract them, for addition, we've got to subtract the two absolute values and then keep the negative if they're a different sign. Keep the negative of the bigger number. So 16 minus 9 is 7. And then because 16 is bigger, I'm going to keep that negative, and the answer is negative 7. Here again, I have a similar situation. 19 minus 7 is 12. 19 is greater in absolute value, so I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. So hopefully you're starting to feel pretty familiar with addition when there's negatives. Number 3, again, the same type of situation. So 21 minus 12 is 9, and then 21 is greater in the absolute value, so I'm going to add that negative to my answer. Okay, let's take a look again. I've got negative 5 minus 3, so I'm going to add the opposite, so adding the opposite. And then for number 5 here, I've got negative 8 minus 9, so add the opposite. And 6 is negative 13 minus 17, so I'm going to do again, add the opposite. Okay, so when I do these, I look at them and I've got a negative plus a negative. The nice thing with addition, when I have two numbers that have the same sign, I just add them like they were a normal addition problem, and then keep the negative of keep the negative in my answer. So this is negative 8, and then 8 plus 9 is 17. This is negative 17, and then negative 13 plus negative 17. When I add 13 plus 17, that's 30, and since they're both negative, I'm going to keep the negative in my answer. Okay, let's do another one. I'm going to use blue here. So again, we're going to add the opposite. So I'm literally changing the subtraction into addition, and I'm adding the opposite. Okay, so when I do this, I have 7 plus 4, and that is 11. 9 plus 9 is 18. And then negative 11 plus 2 is negative 9. So I'm going to subtract the 2 and keep the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number here in absolute value is 11, and it's negative, so I'm going to keep the negative in my answer. Okay. Again, let's try these next sets here. So add the negative, or add the opposite, and then add the opposite. Okay. Something I want you to be careful of is you never put your strokes before the subtraction sign. Sometimes when I'm working with students, they say, oh, I put my 2 strokes right here, and now I have positive 14 plus 4. It doesn't work that way, because the very reason we put the 2 strokes starting at the subtraction sign is because we're turning that subtraction sign into an addition sign, and then we're changing the sign of the number that's being subtracted. And so that stroke actually helps us change the sign of what's being subtracted. If we do it before the subtraction sign and we put it in front of our first number or something like that, you're coming up with a weird new rule that doesn't apply. Okay, so be very careful that you start it on the subtraction sign and then you add the opposite of the number that's being subtracted. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Negative 6 plus positive 9. So I subtract the 2 and keep the sign of my bigger number. My bigger number is 9. So 9 minus 6 is 3, and that's positive 3. Here I have negative 6 plus negative 4. The answer is negative 10. And then here I'm going to subtract the 2, because the rule is when I have different signs, I subtract the absolute value of both numbers. So 20 minus 16 is 4. And then I keep the sign of my bigger number, which is 20. And so the sign is positive and my answer is positive. All right, I would definitely practice and keep going with these. So you can pause the video and do the rest of these. I'm going to write the answers up here. I'm not going to talk through how I did all of them because you know the rule now, but I am going to start writing the answers down, and you can check your answers just to make sure you got them. Let's see, it looks like this page got cut off a little bit, but no, maybe not. No, did I get it cut off? Ooh, I'm writing the wrong answers here. Okay. Sorry. 16, this would be 30, 40, 26, -4. And then this is -32, 27, -23. Okay, those are the answers. All right. Now let's take a look at if we had a variable in our equation. Now, the nice thing is they've given us what the variable represents, what number it represents, and so we can just substitute that amount back into the letter that we see. So in this example, like these exercises here, it tells us A equals 11, B equals -1, and C equals -8. So on your homework, I would really love for you to write out the equation once you've substituted it in. And so you would write this 11 minus 14 on your homework. This would be -1 minus 5. This would be 12 minus -8. And then I'd love for you to get into the habit of putting a negative integer in parentheses. So like this -1 could be in a parentheses, but more specifically than if the number that's being subtracted, if you're subtracting a negative, put that second integer, that second number, in parentheses if it's negative, because it will eliminate you from writing fast. And then, you know, these two lines might accidentally overlap or kind of cross over. And then it's messy and it's hard to see what's going on here. And you might, at a quick glance, look at this as 12 minus 8, when really what you wrote was 12 minus -8. Do you see how that can be confusing? So put this negative in the parentheses to show that it's subtracting a negative number, so that you don't accidentally join those two negatives together and then you change the problem completely. Okay, so we're going to write the equations out and then you're going to solve it. So we're going to practice again using the same skills that we did earlier. So we're going to add the opposite, and this becomes 11 plus -14. And when I add them, my answer is -3. Again, here I'm going to add the opposite. And so I have -1 plus -5, which is -6. And then add the opposite. That becomes +20. Okay, I'm going to write out the problems and then write out the answer for the rest of these. So you can fast forward till the answers or pause and work these out and get the answers, okay? So I have my answer key here in front of me. I'm just going to, I did this earlier, so I'm gonna put this down. I'm actually gonna just write the numbers or the answers down to keep it flowing fast, and so this video doesn't take forever. So you can pause it and work these problems out. You don't have to do all of them. I am gonna say maybe do six of these, pick 6 to do and check your answers. In your homework, I'd really love for you to circle your answers because then it's really easy for me to see exactly where your answers are. But 19 here, and that's 4, -7, and -12. Okay, that should be everything here. So good job with this lesson. And the biggest rule with this, knowing the rule gets you far, but practicing is what's going to get it drilled in your head. This should become so second nature that you don't have to think through the rule anymore. You just do it automatically and know how to subtract negative numbers. So practice this a lot. You know, if you feel like doing those 6 problems here was not enough practice for you, then keep going, do the rest of them, and see if you get them right. All right, I'll see you next time.